Hello and welcome to another patron-funded bonus instalment of Fantastic Fights, the podcast about a middle-aged man playing adventure gamebooks out loud on the internet. That middle-aged man is me, Hieronymus J. Doom, and this episode we'll be looking at Way of the Tiger Ninja, a prequel to the awesome Way of the Tiger series written by Mark Smith and Jamie Thomson in the mid-80s. We're going to be doing the whole Way of the Tiger series over the course of this year, and I'm extremely grateful to Stuart Lloyd for the loan of the beautiful collector's editions of the books. I'm really looking forward to playing the full series for the first time in about 30 years. First, a quick apology for the lateness of this episode. I got COVID a couple of weeks ago, despite being vaccinated, and it absolutely destroyed me for doing anything productive. I seem to be fully recovered now, and hopefully normal service will be resumed from here on in. COVID, like superhero movies, still very much a thing in 2024, despite what you might have hoped. Ninja, Book 0 in the Way of the Tiger series, is a later edition, and was written by David Walters as part of the aforementioned collector's editions with art by Mylene Villeneuve, Eric Chaussin, Aude Pfister, Matthias Sallstrom, Lisa Rafalli, Faiz Nabheebucus, and Antoine Di Lorenzo, and I apologise enormously if I have butchered any or indeed all of those names. It was published in 2014 by Megara Entertainment. Let's take a look at the rules. There's quite a few rules, but I'll give you the quickest rundown I can. There's no rolling for your basic stats here, which I think is a great shout. Much easier to balance a game book when you know exactly how good the character's going to be at the start. So you get given an endurance, which is your stamina, and begins at 20. Lose all of that, and it's game over. Fighting using various ninja techniques is a key part of Way of the Tiger, so you have 3 basic attacks you can use: a punch, a kick, and a throw. You resolve them all by rolling 2d6 against the target's defense number, which will be provided by the text. Roll over the defense and you have hit. Punch is a basic attack and usually does 1d6 damage to your opponent's endurance. A kick is harder to hit with, the target number will be higher, but it usually does 1d6 plus 2 damage. The throw does no damage, but it makes the opponent easier to hit if it lands, allowing you to add 2 to your next attack roll. Miss an attack and your opponent will strike back, and I think they'll strike back if you actually hit as well. They roll 2d6 against your defense score, which is given in the text, and deal damage to your endurance if they hit. You can, if you are hit, try and block a melee attack by forcing the opponent to make another attack roll. If they fail that, then you take no damage. Whether they hit or miss, you will be taking a -2 penalty to your next attack, however. Your character also starts with 3 points of inner force, which can be spent to deal double damage, a very handy resource for tough fights. You can improve your punch, kick, and throw by learning ninja techniques, which will allow you to add permanent modifiers to your abilities. So if you get an improved punch, you'll be able to add 1 to every punch you make, which is a nice little way of improving your character and giving you that sort of role-playing experience. My feeling is that I want to try and improve kick as quickly as I possibly can, because improving your best attack is usually a good plan in these kind of systems. Throws feel as though they're going to be very situational as to whether or not they're useful. Which probably means they're going to be the one that I never improve. So that's the combat system in a nutshell. Not the simplest system, but I remember it working pretty well in practice, and learning a bunch of different combat skills was awesome, and the book sternly warned you not to attempt to replicate them in real life, which I also enjoyed as a way of selling them as deadly martial arts. Your last skill is Fate, which functions a bit like luck. It's resolved by a straight 50-50 roll on 2d6, but you can improve your Fate modifier over the course of the adventure to make it a bit more likely that you'll be lucky. You also get to pick some ninja skills to play with. There's 9 in total, but you have to take Shuriken Jutsu, which lets you throw shuriken at people, which is cool but also a bit rude. You can then select 3 skills from the remaining 8. They're fairly self-explanatory. Arrow cutting lets you knock arrows out of the air. Acrobatics is your basic circus skills. Immunity to poisons is immunity to poisons. Feigned death lets you pretend to be dead, very handy for dull meetings. Escapology lets you escape. Climbing lets you climb. Poison needles lets you spit poison needles, which is awesome, but you will need to find some poison first. And there's a skill for detecting and disarming traps. All of the skills seem super useful, to be honest, which is nice, but we will see from the text whether or not that's actually the case. So alongside Shuriken Jutsu, I've decided to take the core ninja skills of climbing, trap disarming and acrobatics because I want to be a jumpy wee fellow. Lastly, you get some gear, a reversible ninja costume which is equally fashionable in summer and winter, like a 90s shell suit, some ordinary clothes so that you can pretend to be ordinary, a breathing tube which you can presumably double as a handy straw for delicious beverages, iron rods in your sleeves which you can use to block swords and the like, flash powder for doing unimpressive stage magic, a garrote in case you get bored in a hotel room, and a flint and tinder in case you want to set fire to something, and that's great because I always want to set fire to things. You get 5 shuriken to lob at people who talk in the cinema or whatever. I think that's everything. Hopefully that all made sense. Regardless of whether it did or not, we're going to get started with Ninja. Now, I'm not going to read the background section this time because I want to get into the action proper. Basically, you are a ninja and you live on Ninja Island. A bad ninja killed a good ninja and that made everyone sad. Before you can become a proper ninja, you need to participate in a trial. You and 4 other aspirants must cross an island in 5 days and try and get your hands on some very, very fancy flags. These flags are owned by the 5 daimyo who rule the island. Nick 2 flags and you'll be top of the ninja class with gold stars and everything. It's a serviceable bit of background and gives you a nice clear mission, which I always appreciate. We are warned not to do any evil on the way, but I'll be doing my level best to murder any daimyo we come across because there needs to be some checks on power in any functioning society, and being strangled by a ninja in your sleep seems like a good check on power to me. Okay, let's begin. Your small ship, the Catechism, sails into Lemnes harbour, the sprawling city lit by the soft glow of 1,000 night lamps. The vessel is manned by fishermen from the island of tranquil dreams, their work punctuated by the creak of timber and the splash of waves against the hull. You and the 4 other initiates of the inner circle are assembled above deck. You are the youngest ever selected to begin the time of trial, and you vow to succeed to honour the memory of your late foster father, Naijishi. Aiko is the first of your rivals for the title of Grand Master. Like you, she wears a black ninja costume, and she kneels nearby rechecking her equipment. Your other competitors are all shaven-headed monks of Kwon. First is the towering Gorobai, who stretches against the mast as if he could push it over. He is your main rival, having nearly succeeded at this trial once before. Next is Dion, who leans against the wooden rail staring out across the dark sea. He fled the island as a boy, his temple incinerated during the Black Lotus Rebellion. Last is the eldest competitor, Shigeru, a slight figure who has cultivated his spiritual power under a Grand Master in the mountains of the mainland. He sits cross-legged on a coil of rope, meditating. People who meditate in public are the worst people. Just going to throw that out there. Bit of shade on the meditation community. I mean, I make use of meditation, but I do it in the privacy of my own home, and less smugly, I think, than Shigeru. Your ship moors alongside a merchant ship. You spot a young woman, dressed in a startling kimono of rich cloth and bedecked in jewellery. Her waist is wrapped in multiple sashes, along with a golden belt, and her hair is tied up around ivory horns. She is flanked by 2 samurai in white lacquered armour. Gorobai heads down the gangplank, which groans under his weight, and you follow. "Gorobai," she says softly, "I am most pleased to see you again. For the rest of you, welcome. My name is Singing Wind." Gorobai bows. "I'm surprised to see you here, my lady. The last time this test was set by your husband." A look of pain passes across her. "My husband has been assassinated. My troubles outweigh any test I was to have set you. The bandit leader, Matari, has since slain my guards and seized my home, taking my husband's falcon katana to claim dominion of Lemne. My remaining samurai are away, escorting my husband's body to his family estate, and so I beseech you for help." Gorobai eagerly volunteers to help, as do Daon and Aiko. "What of the flag we were to compete for?" Chigurh asks. "Whoever wrests the falcon katana from Matari's corpse will earn my flag." Chigurh says that a spear does not become sharper the more steel you put into its tip. Singing Wind has already several champions for her cause. Instead, he declares he will hasten to Nara to capture another flag. So we now have a choice to make. We can agree to help Singing Wind and work alongside the others. Don't play well with others. Seize a head start, leaving Lemne along the northern road to the castle at Suma, or follow Chigurh's route, leaving Lemne along the southern road to the ancient city of Nara. I am enormously irritated by Chigurh, and nothing would please me more than to beat him to whichever flag he is going to try and take. So we're going to follow Chigurh. You jog south along the Imperial Road towards Nara as the dawn's first light swells in the sky, the white paved road abruptly changing into normal grey paving stones as you progress. You are disguised now as a simple traveller. The road is deserted at this early hour, and you make good progress. The countryside around you contains numerous farms and villages, all well managed and maintained. The land lives up to its name of the Island of Plenty. The fields eventually give way to hills with valleys of bamboo groves and woods. You are alerted by movement ahead at the side of the road. There are 3 men in brown habits standing around a figure tied to a tree, and you sneak along the trees by the side of the road to get closer. All 3 men bear the symbol of the inverted cross of Avatar, with a serpent writhing in mist atop it, marking them out as reverencers of Vile. They are said to be skilled at martial arts and fanatically devout to their evil god, who is the twisted brother of your god Quan. To your horror, you see that tied to the tree is the small figure of Chigurh, bruised, pale, unmoving. Nearby, a body of a 4th man in a brown habit lies broken and bloodied. Oblivious to your presence, one of the 3 reverencers takes out a knife and stabs it into Chigurh's side, who does not flinch. Inexplicably, when the blade is withdrawn, it is unblemished by blood. The reverencers are bemused at this and discuss cutting off his head to see what will happen. You realise that you have to fight them at once regardless of the odds, and you burst from cover. Do I have to fight them? Chigurh knew the risks when he embarked on this mission. We could just leave them to get on with it. But we're not going to, apparently. You focus on the nearest reverencer, determined to finish him off before attacking the others. If you wish, you can hurl a shuriken if you have any left. So if we do make an attack roll, I think we will. Target has a defense of 5. So roll 2d6. 6. So I've hit the target with the shuriken, and I can deduct 1 die of damage from his endurance of 12. So that's 4, giving him an endurance of 8. Suddenly, Chigurh springs into life. Although bound, he wraps his feet around the neck of the foe nearest to him, while the 3rd falls back startled. Against your opponent, do you want to try a dragon's tail throw, tiger's paw chop, or a leaping tiger kick? If I do a tiger kick, I can potentially take this foe out in a single round. So that's what I'm going to do. Let's go big or go home. You spring into action, leaping into the air and diving the ball of your foot at his face, hoping to stun your opponent, if not outright kill him. The Reverencer of Vile has a defense of 7. And I roll a 7, and I suddenly realise I can't remember whether you have to roll equal or actually over. No, you have to roll higher than the attack number, so I have missed. So if he's still alive, he feigns a kick and tries to strike you with a rapid double punch. Your defense is 7, so he rolls a 3, which is a miss. If you survive, you may either try a throw or try a tiger's paw chop. Let's try a tiger's paw chop. You feign a punch with your left hand but deliver it with your right, aiming to strike at the head of your enemy. So he's got a defense of 6 against the tiger's paw chop. I get a 9 and I deal 4 points of damage, reducing him to 4. If he's still alive, he kicks at your midriff so quickly you may not block. Your defense against this kick is 7. It's a 9, and I lose 2 endurance, taking me down to 18. So, I guess we'll try a leaping tiger kick again, which misses. He tries to hit me, which he hits. Leaping tiger kick again, misses. He misses. I miss. He hits. So this is why I usually do fights off mic, but I did want to sort of show you what the combat system was like. So, yeah, he's just hit me again. I'm now down to 12. This I could literally die in the first fight. Double 1. I lose another 6. Okay. So I've died. Yeah, I've literally died in the very first fight. That's insane. Yeah, he just carried on hitting me. Apparently, I'm about as good a fictional ninja as I am a real ninja. But obviously far too early to call a halt there, so let's work on the principle that I did win the fight, invoking the sausagey finger bookmark rule. And, yeah, I'm putting my endurance back up to maximum, quite honestly. Yeah, weird thing. I just could not hit him. I could not roll above a 6. And he just kept rolling really high and rolling really high damage. Absolute madness. Don't think it's a reflection on the combat system particularly. I should have hit him as often as he hit me, or slightly more often than he hit me, but I couldn't. So, yeah, let's pretend that didn't happen. Very embarrassing. And we'll pretend we've killed him. Maybe he was just so ashamed of how bad we were at fighting that he just wandered off. You fell your opponent and ready yourself for the next. Meanwhile, you see that Chigurh has strangled the second Reverencer with his legs while still tied to the tree. Oh, he's so good. He's so good at being a ninja. And now works to free himself from his rope bindings. The third Reverencer rushes in and you meet him with a double tiger's paw chop on each side of the neck. His defense against this is 6. If you fail to hit him, which I have, he will try and punch you with blinding speed, and your defense is 7. No, he doesn't hit me. You may not block, but if you survive, then you may continue trading blows. So, fine. I'm going to roll some dice. Okay, I have successfully managed to hit the second Reverencer with my double tiger's paw chop. He dealt 2 damage to me along the way, so my endurance is now 18. You slam the Reverencer of Vile on both sides of his neck and he staggers back in shock before falling to his knees, hands in the air. His submission is genuine, Chigurh calls out to you as he frees himself, for these men are in awe when faced with a clearly superior power, but nevertheless his life is yours to take. Will you finish off the Reverencer with a kick to the neck, or spare him on the condition that he tells you how he came upon your friend? Kick to the neck, please. Basically because Chigurh really, really irritates me. You lunge forward on the ball of your foot, slamming into the neck of the Reverencer and snapping it like kindling. He sprawls back dead without a sound, his neck lolling at an impossible angle. There is one less worshipper of evil in the world, and you feel no sorrow for it. Chigurh watches on in silence, his expression inscrutable. One day I hope to be able to do the same to Chigurh. If you struck a Reverencer with a shuriken, you may now retrieve it, which I did. Excellent. Chigurh thanks you for your help, saying he was set upon by the Reverencers as he walked along the road, killing one before being overwhelmed by the others. And why did you not bleed when they stabbed you? You ask. I was able to separate my mind from my body just as you do, but with much more control. I once had a Grand Master in the Man March teach me such things. No matter. It seems that our enemies know of our trial and have set out forces to kill us. You ask what you can do to help the other trialists. By now they will be scattered, he says resignedly. We cannot help them unless our paths cross. I must share with you now a dream vision I had whilst the followers of Vile captured me. I saw a vortex hanging in the air, black and swirling. At the centre of the vortex was a pair of blood-red eyes looking out across the island, seeking us out. It seems clear that we are being hunted. As for me, I will continue to Nara. Will you join me? Will you join Chigurh on the journey to Nara? I would rather die. Or decide not to compete with him directly and bypass Nara, heading along the road for Takahiri, the disreputable city of bridges. I am sick of the sight of this smug, annoying, pompous ass, so I will go to Takahiri, city of bridges. Nice to think that if I didn't follow him, he might well have been murdered. Night falls and you decide to rest for a little at the side of the road, with no company except for the chirping cicadas. Your night vision is as honed as your hearing, and you can detect no dangers in this peaceful land. You climb a pear tree and catch some sleep wedged between two branches. On awakening, you pick pears and eat them for breakfast, finding them greatly refreshing after your travels, before dropping to the ground and heading on west. You may restore 5 lost endurance, taking my endurance back up to 20. You continue on towards Takahiri. You hasten along the road to Takahiri, which continues over a series of bridges and small fords. On either side of the road, the rice paddies give way to uninhabited swampland, with bushes and ferns constantly encroaching on the road. You occasionally spot snakes, frogs, and other marsh creatures in the murky water. The hours of your trial march on. You pass a few pilgrims, but beyond an occasional greeting, none of them pays you any particular notice. You find yourself passing a post station where travellers can rest for the night and get a hot meal. Outside is a samurai of Ao, dressed in gold lacquer armour, practising some moves with his katana. As you walk near, the blade suddenly shines with a light blue light. He shouts at you from behind his metal helmet mask. Watch out! My blade has taken on a mind of its own. By my ancestors, it wants to attack you. He swings it in the air in jerks as if controlled by invisible strings and struggles against his own sword. Will you try and wrench away his sword with an improvised whirlpool throw? Try to topple him with a dragon's tail throw, or run on and leave him to his fate? Don't care about him. Yep, I'm going to leave him to his fate. Dangerous things, swords. You hurry away from the golden-armoured samurai, not wishing to get involved in his struggles. A moment later, the katana flies unbidden from his hands. Do you have the skill of arrow cutting? I do not. Unfortunately, your flight means exposing your back to him, and you are skewered on the blade that flies from the samurai's hands. Lose 10 points of endurance. How? If you are still alive, the light blue glow fades from the katana, and despite the terrible agony, you pull it out from you. The samurai of Ao runs over in near panic, his steps thudding along the road in his heavy armour. He reaches into his armour to produce a bandage and applies a field dressing. Please, you must rest, he says. You manage to ask him how his sword came to be enchanted. My name is Enomoto, he says as he checks the bandage and applies pressure. I left my duties guarding the shrine of Ao in the wilderness to undertake a holy pilgrimage of fasting and meditation. I stayed here in the post station overnight, but my katana had been moved in the room when I awoke. Someone must have ensorcelled it, but I do not understand why your presence set it off. He runs into the post station and emerges with a bowl of rice porridge, which you eat as you recover your strength. For all his attention, you may regain 4 endurance. Okay, now back up to 14. Yeah, very good for a stabbing, a bowl of rice porridge. With time running out on your trial, you bid him farewell and hasten along the paved road as quickly as your wounds allow. If you already have 2 flags, then you bypass Takahiri since you have all the flags needed for the trial and continue west. Otherwise, you head for the city of Takahiri. So I have no flags, not one. You make good progress as you continue straight along the road to Takahiri, the city of bridges that sits astride the Whitewater River, which later splits into an estuary out into the endless sea. It is night time as you join the queue of farmers at the city gates, since all those who arrive in the city must bathe before entering. They cast envious looks at the queues of wealthy visitors who are being shepherded into a luxurious bathhouse. You stand patiently and wait for the poor man's scrub, a bucket of cold water to be thrown over you by one of the weary-looking workers. Find the sensation quite refreshing after your long journey and proceed through the gate dripping water. It's a nice little vignette. Being forcibly bathed. I like that. The streets are clean and quiet, despite there being virtually no samurai around. You pass a large temple to Zaraharial, the goddess of seduction, which is taking its evening mass, as evidenced by the rising carnal noises from within. You pass over a curved wooden bridge and make your way along the streets containing gambling halls, sake dens, and pleasure houses, all abuzz with patrons and revelry. You make a few discreet inquiries in the sake dens about the daimyo's gold-trimmed flag, and the answer comes back consistently. One hangs in the Palace of Grasping Stars, where the daimyo is hosting a series of balls every night this week to celebrate some local festival. The palace is open to all who intend to compete for a prize of gold, but this is not without its dangers. You cross over another bridge towards the daimyo's palace when you sense movement to your left in the otherwise deserted street. "What business have you in Takahiri, stranger?" comes a voice from a dark alley. "You are no mere traveller." A stern man steps out of hiding, and you see he is dressed in black with a vertical red sash. He is armed with darts and carries a climbing hook and has a sword and bow slung over his back. You ask him who he is. "I am now an infiltration specialist representing the Bukatu Syndicate. I've been told you are asking questions about the daimyo's palace." There is a picture of Now, a lovely portrait. Very nice, actually. It's not my style of illustration, in the sense that it is extremely well executed, full colour, but it lacks any sort of stylization, I would say. It is a really good artist doing their best to realistically depict the character described in the text. There's no background either, which is a bit of a shame. And for all that, yeah, I mean, this is a wonderful piece of work from a purely skill perspective. It just doesn't have any soul to me. This is my own personal preference. I much prefer weird, stylized, and bizarre-looking art that's maybe even a bit cartoonish at times. I'd rather have that than something sort of dispassionately beautiful, and this is nothing if not dispassionately beautiful. So what will I say to Now, though? I'm just going to tell him the truth. I'm going to say I intend to take something from the daimyo of Takahiri. You say that you intend to take a flag bearing a golden trim from the daimyo and watch his reaction closely. He nods and seems unperturbed. "I intend to take something from him too," he says. "The sport he makes of his victims sacrificed to entertain the corrupt wealthy. The Bakuto Syndicate alone in this city resists the tyranny imposed by the daimyo. I assume you are a thief like me and have some skills in finding your way into unwelcome places. Perhaps we can help each other. I will help you get the flag if you help me to save the people who will be lured to the palace tonight. You can agree to help now, or you can work alone, or you can abandon the flag of this city and hasten along the road to Nasaka. But you only have the time to do the latter if you made no attempt on the flag in Nara and have not yet been to Nasaka. Some clever design on display here. But I think we will agree to Nao's help. You follow now through the shadowy alleys of the city streets, well away from the lamplight, heading for the palace. You ask him why he wears a bright red sash that marks him out if he wants to go unseen. Which is a fair question. So the common people will know me to be one of the Bakuto syndicate, he says. I was once one of the guards of the daimyo until I left, sickened by his excesses. The Bakuto syndicate took me in and trained me in infiltration. What about you? What is your background? You tell now that you are a thief for hire, paid to embarrass the daimyo by taking his most prized flag. You reach the stone wall outside the palace. Now uses his grappling hook to climb up the wall, and you follow him up the rope. You steal across the luxurious gardens towards the lavish lotus leaf structure of the Palace of Grasping Stars, with its delicately carved exterior of people cavorting in a river. I feel as though I've missed out because I've never cavorted in a river. Now I'm nearly 45. Maybe my best river cavorting days are behind me. You notice that more than half of the building remains unroofed and unfurnished. This place is like a parasite on the city, Now mutters, stealing all the wealth to build this wasteful monument to folly. 2 samurai in blue lacquered armour are overseeing a group of commoners wash their hands and feet and gargle in a marble fountain in a purity ritual. Sorry, I can hear my cat shrieking, which is weird because he's just been fed. Those poor fools are going to be the blood sacrifice, Now whispers. Now sneaks over to a river coming out from a small cave and crawls his way inside. I've received word this will lead us directly to the sacrifice room. You follow him in. The world building in this feels absolutely splendid. The space becomes much bigger inside as you follow Now, wading up the river cave. The palace has a dank, putrid smell, and from somewhere in the dark cavern you hear a deep, feral rumble. Now draws his sword and slashes at something ahead, but he is knocked aside by a massive clawed hand that emerges from the darkness, and he falls against the cave wall. Something is moving its way towards you. Something large, horned, and monstrous. Its worn fur exposing coarse pink flesh bulging with muscle. Its eyes are sightless, covered by a putrid yellow pus that dribbles down its face and stains the sharp teeth in its gaping maw. You must now fight. We can deduct 6 from its endurance of 22. It's called the Pit Feeder, due to Now's attack, reducing it to 16. I've got the usual decision about what kind of violence I want to perpetrate upon the Pit Feeder's personage. And I'm going to do this one off mic. So I'm going to roll some dice. I have defeated the Pit Feeder without taking any damage. Kind of like a weird mirror image of that first fight we did. Yeah, just kicked its face off. The Pit Feeder, by the way, did 2 damage, but only 1 if you had immunity to poisons, which is a nice little combat wrinkle. Enjoyed that. Very grateful it didn't actually manage to hit me, given that I've only got 14 endurance at this point. The Pit Feeder collapses to the ground, jerking in its death throes before finally lying still. Did you arrive here with an associate? I surely did. You check on Now, who is concussed and bleeding but well enough to stand. You are no ordinary thief, he says, shaking his head in disbelief. I am Ninja, you say simply, and watch fear and awe spread across his face. You assure him that you follow Quan and fight for good. From somewhere above comes a muffled, horrified scream. The bloody sacrifice has begun, Now says. We must save the people. They are trapped above with Daimyo's pet creature. He throws his grappling hook to a broad wooden door in the cave ceiling, and you and Now heave the rope together. With a tremendous effort, the trapdoor cracks open and a torrent of water spills down. In moments, the cave echoes with screams as out from the drain fall a crowd of packed commoners and a giant, thrashing conger eel. You leap over the lash of its tail as now fires an arrow into its side. The eel squirms into the underground stream and swims away, leaving you standing soaked, surrounded by the living and the dead. As the survivors choke and gasp, you glance through the trapdoor to see a large, well-lit room. Directly in sight is a gold-trimmed white flag bearing the symbol of a blue gentiana flower. Before you can speak, Now throws his grappling hook to the edge of the broken trapdoor, and, with a nod, he turns his attention to the wounded. You climb up through a hole into the circular gallery with windows. Thankfully, the windows are empty, and you hear only laughter nearby. You collect the flag! Yay! I'm not a complete disappointment to my dead stepfather. You rejoin Now, who is leading the people back out of the gardens, and go in turns carrying the wounded. We must scatter before the guards locate us, he says as you emerge onto grass. Thank you for your help, Ninja. I wish you well on your journey. You stuff the flag into your clothes and bid Now farewell, saying you have pressing business to the west. I, for one, would not like to stand between you and pressing business. It will be morning soon, and you find a dark spot in the city next to a sake den and a canal to catch some much-needed sleep before daybreak. You may restore 3 points of endurance, so we're now up to 17. Endurance 20 feels about right. I mean, it sort of feels like a lot when you've got full endurance, but it soon goes away in combat, making every combat feel a little bit tense. There is a picture of Takahiri at Daybreak by Lisa Rafalli. It's really good. Just a beautiful, slightly, I guess, almost impressionistic scene with beautiful use of light. Much more interesting to me than the sort of portrait of the thief. It's really good. Really good. Hazy, mysterious. Yeah, the sun just peeping over the clouds. Yeah, really nice. Kind of like weirdly reminds me a little bit of sort of Lowry's work. Not an execution, but that sort of feel of looking at the ordinary world is really nice. It is morning, and you hurry to leave Takahiri through the main gate. Do you have 2 flags? I do not, so I may yet be able to hasten along the road north for Nasaka if I've not been there yet. You only have time if you've made no attempt on the flag in Nara, which I did not do. So, we'll go to Nasaka. You realise that you are running out of time to get 2 flags and still make it in time to Eiger. In desperation, you steal into the spacious grounds of one of the city's wealthy merchants and enter their stable to take a horse. Soon you are riding out of Takiri at breakneck speed along the deserted road at night, feeling your chances of attaining the next flag in time slipping away. As soon as you first spy the lights of Nasaka in the distance, you set the horse free and send it running back south. You continue with all haste on foot to the capital's gates. It's very well structured, this. You encounter no problems as you head along the road to Nasaka. It is night and you blend in as one of many pilgrims travelling inside the gates. You head for the inner stone wall of the traditional old town, passing empty white marble plinths where golden statues of the previous emperors once stood. You see numerous red-armoured samurai here, some carrying lanterns, and you note that there are no sake dens or merchants in this part of the capital. I do like the fact that the samurai are all colour-coded. That's oddly delightful to me. You pass the bowl-like divine scriptorum and find yourself outside the Winter Palace, a sprawling complex with its own stone wall that houses the samurai of the city. Beyond a closed iron gates is the gold statue of the first emperor, wearing a kimono of silver. "So, Trilist of Quan, you have arrived," comes a voice behind you. You turn to see that the speaker is a white-haired monk in a wicker hat who is blind and carries a bamboo walking stick. He bows to you nonetheless. You ask him how he knows of you. I am the Master of the Unseen, and I was told by the Grand Master of the Dawn of your forthcoming trial here. I have a test of enlightenment for any who wish to take my daimyo's flag. He walks forward to the iron gates of the Winter Palace, which the samurai open for him on approach. He beckons to you, before tapping his cane on the ground on his way onward. You will get no better opportunity to enter the well-guarded Winter Palace, and so hasten after him across the ornamental gardens to a stone bench opposite a carp pool. He sits and bids you to do likewise. Your test to earn the flag is one of enlightenment, the monk says. My first question is this. If your brother monks of Quan were to fight for a cause that was unjust, who would hold your allegiance? Would you fight with them in an unjust cause, or would you stand apart even knowing that it could well lead to all their deaths? Think of a way to answer this question, write down your answer, and then turn to the next paragraph. So, my answer is, I don't deal in hypotheticals. You baffling old man. Hypothetically, what would you say if I punched you in your stupid face? I mean, I feel as though the right answer is literally to yell, only a Sith deals in absolutes, and punch him in the face as hard as I can, but that's not going to be the right answer. I would stand against them in an unjust cause. So the options are, you can write, my brother monks, what is right? Or you can say Quan, or neither side. And there's no option for what it says if you wrote down shut up. I guess that would be neither side, or otherwise did not choose an allegiance. But yeah, I went for what is right. I should have stuck with my guns. If I'd literally just said only a Sith deals in absolutes, that would have been an option. My allegiance is to what is right, you say. In the case of an unjust war, I would be forced to fight against my brother monks. The master sighs. And who would say what is right? You? No. The rights and wrongs of this world are decided by the gods, and none other, and it is in them that we must put our faith. Now you must leave. Will you leave as instructed, or demand that the master gives you another chance to prove yourself? I'm so vaguely hoping I can punch this blind man in the face. Not a sentence I imagined saying this morning. You stand and demand that the master give you another chance. No, he says. It must be the same test for all the trialists, for that is the only fair way. You begin to argue, but he holds up a hand to silence you, and you somehow find yourself unable to speak at the power of his simple gesture. You have already had several chances on this island, he says, and you have squandered them. You feel as though you have offended this powerful figure, so you get -1 fate. Whoops. You leave Nasaka as quickly as you can, and thankfully your power of speech returns. You catch what little sleep you can in a public park in Nasaka until daybreak. You breakfast lightly on rice wrapped in lotus leaves, eating only enough to sustain you. Do you have 2 flags? I do not. If you do not have 2 flags, you may yet be able to hasten along the road south for the disreputable city of Bridges, which I've already been there. Okay, this is complicated. So, if you have 2 flags, you've got what you need. Fine, that goes to one way. If you do not have 2 flags, you may yet be able to hasten along the road south for the disreputable city of Bridges, Takahiri, if you've not already been there. You only have the time if you made no attempt on the flag in Suma. So I can go to Takahiri if I've not made an attempt on the flag of Suma, which I haven't. If you have less than 2 flags but have made an attempt on Suma, you're running out of time. But I haven't made an attempt on Suma. So I guess I kind of have to go to Takahiri. So no, I can't go to Takahiri, which means that there's only 2 other options. The running out of time option, or the travelling to Iga. Yeah, this is badly worded. Badly worded. I've been staring at it for a while. I think I just got to go to running out of time. you do not yet have the 2 flags that you require to complete your trial. You spend a day seeking out another city you have not yet seen, but are quick to discover that all have been visited by your fellow trialists and there are no more flags to claim. You no longer have time to try for another and still make Eiger within the days remaining. You cannot help but feel that you have let down your late foster father, Naijishi, who worked to train you in ninjutsu. You head west for Eiger, as the trial demands, but do so half-heartedly, unaware that your destiny has been thwarted for a dark purpose. Once back on the island of tranquil dreams, the Grandmaster of the Dawn chooses another champion of lesser ability when a call arises to save Orb from evil. The forces of darkness will sweep across Orb and you will die by their hand on the island of tranquil dreams, missing your chance to become the one who could have stopped them. The end. Okay, well, we made it to an ending. That seems good. I had a really nice time with that. I've got some thoughts. I think there's some stuff that I'm going to enjoy more on a second run through, and there's some stuff that I might maybe enjoy a little bit less. I feel as though maybe there ought to be a little bit more to do in some of the cities, but maybe some of the cities are a little bit more involved in how they're designed. I don't think the ones that there are designed badly by any means, but I'll be certainly looking to see what the cities are like when I play through it again on my own time, which I'm going to do right now. I'll be back for you in just a few moments with some closing remarks. Tatty bye. It was really nice to get an actual ending on my recorded playthrough, even if I did have to invoke the sausage finger bookmark rule to get there. This is very much a game of 2 halves, with the capture the flag game occupying the first portion, and then the much more dangerous journey to hand in the flags occupying the second half of the book. I mentioned at the start that I'd played Way of the Tiger before, though obviously not this one since it came out in 2013. Playing this book really triggered a powerful feeling of nostalgia in me, despite it being entirely new material. I don't think I ever saw Way of the Tiger books actually for sale, but my local library had some, possibly even a complete set, and I definitely played all of the available books and enjoyed them hugely. The original series ended on a cliffhanger, but I'm delighted that the original authors were able to complete the series. The full set are still available relatively cheaply on Amazon and indeed through other book purchasing channels, and it's so important to keep these classic books in circulation. Would that Fighting Fantasy had been shown the same love. Basic digital editions of the entire series really should be available, even if I accept that printing physical copies of tosh like Skylord is probably too expensive to be worth exploring. The collector's edition of Way of the Tiger Ninja I've been reading is a beautiful object. There is a rather sad tale to be told about Megara Entertainment, which put these lovely editions out. It's probably not my place to wade into that murky story, but suffice to say that Megara Entertainment was largely funded through Kickstarter and ultimately folded amid widespread accusations of shady practices and broken promises, with a number of projects being unfulfilled. If you're interested, have a Google and you can read some people's accounts of what happened. It's a pity, but at least they did manage to put out some very nice looking books along the way, and Way of the Tiger Ninja is a very nice looking book indeed. There's some lovely art in here, and being a hardback, it does feel like a premium product with full colour throughout. The art is something of a mixed bag, but there's quite a lot of it which is awesome, and while I think I'd rather see art from a single artist than from a selection of different hands, it's nonetheless a treat to have all these full colour, full page pieces. The choice of what to depict has generally been really good as well. We get a lot of portraits of characters, pictures of monsters, and some lovely depictions of the various cities. There's no empty rooms with chests in the middle to be seen, and that is a positive. On a personal note, I feel that if you're going to have some manga-influenced art, then it really needs to be all manga-influenced art. Manga is such a strong and recognisable aesthetic that it can sit awkwardly with other styles of illustration. I think it would have been really cool to have gone all in on manga art and given the book a completely different feel to the 1980s editions that were originally printed. Manga and ninjas obviously go well together, and an exaggerated style would mesh very nicely with the over-the-top ninja action story contained within the pages. That brings us to the best thing about this book. It really sets out to sell the fantasy of being a ninja. At no point in the text do you really stop doing ninja stuff, and every challenge you face is dealt with by ninjing at it as hard as you possibly can. From the first challenge to the final showdown, you'll be throwing shuriken, climbing things, disguising yourself, hiding in the shadows, and tiger paw chopping everything in sight. I absolutely love how completely the book focuses on its core fantasy. I'm a big fan of books that do this well. Freeway Fighter is a good example of how you can make a book that draws on a very specific fantasy, in that case Mad Max, and try and make everything in your gamebook serve that fantasy. It's something that I think is simultaneously easy and hard. It's easy because if you pick the right theme, then so much of the book's structure will suggest itself. If I decide to write a book about being a postman, then delivering letters, trying to find someone to sign for a parcel, and being chased by a dog are all things I'm going to be more or less duty-bound to include. The big question, and I think the hard bit, is how you frame the action in a way that makes it seem new, but also fits in with that fantasy. You probably want there to be something special about this particular delivery round for this particular postman, something which provides for elevated stakes. Perhaps another villainous postman covets your prestigious delivery route and is actively trying to sabotage your progress in a dick-dastardly fashion. Perhaps there's a cash bonus for finishing your round quickly, and you need that money urgently to pay for a child's birthday present. The important thing is that if you're trying to sell the fantasy of being a postman, whatever novel stakes you create for your postman need to be resolved through doing postman stuff. You don't want your postman to be solving problems with a laser gun. Or maybe you do. Other approaches to designing gamebooks are also valid. But the idea of selling people on a fantasy becomes really important when you have a character like a ninja, where people have strong ideas about how they should behave and the sort of things they should do. You can tell great stories about people stepping outside their comfort zone and having to learn new skills, but those stories generally work best with everyman characters who lack obviously applicable skills. A receptionist having to thwart a terrorist attack on their building through improvisation and moxie is a generally more appealing story than one in which Wonder Woman has to do her tax return. Wonder Woman has a bunch of skills, and in general we want to see her use them. In the same way, Incredible Hulk stories where Hulk doesn't smash always feel a little disappointing, even if they're really well written. Long-time listeners may remember my review of Seas of Blood, which has a great pirate theme and a fantastic premise of finding out who can do the most pirate stuff, but then somehow never quite succeeds in feeling like a pirate story. When you tell me I'm playing a pirate, I want cutlass duels, walking the plank, and capturing ships. Seas of Blood was much more of a straightforward fantasy story with some pirate frills. Perfectly enjoyable, but I was told I was going to be doing pirate stuff and there just wasn't enough. If fighting fantasy had been awash with pirate stories, then something which draws on other influences, that would have made a nice change. But as it panned out, it was a little disappointing. All of which is to say that if you tell me I'm a ninja, I expect to ninja, and this book has you ninjaing hard. You've got a great framing device of the world's best ninja competition, which is always a good way of setting stakes. It worked in Midnight Rogue, which has a very similar premise, but this book really sticks the landing, possibly better than anything from the Fighting Fantasy series. There are fighting fantasy books that have a similar structure, but they always seem to end up leaning on fighting fantasy tropes a little too much, to the detriment of the tropes the structure's suggesting. Midnight Rogue's starting areas, where you get to be a thief, are great, but it finishes with another dungeon that could have come from almost any book in the series. This book starts you off with some classic ninja infiltration and petty theft, then takes you on a journey to break things up, but then, very sensibly, concludes with some more classic ninja infiltration. Even the journey manages to feel very ninja. Overall, it feels like being in an action movie in the best possible way. I really like how the journey over the mountains breaks up the action, and then how things circle back to a really classic ninja finale. If I was being picky, I would say that the finale doesn't quite finale enough. It's cool, but it lacks a wow factor commensurate with being the climax of the story. It wouldn't have taken a huge amount to push it over the edge in a really memorable way and deliver a genuinely unforgettable set piece. What there is great, but it is just that little bit muted for me. The other thing that really sets this book apart is its status as a prequel. It doesn't generally feel like a prequel in how it plays out. If this was the only book you ever played, you'd walk away, I think, satisfied for the most part with the narrative. It's a little frustrating when you tangle with a wizard and don't get the chance to even the score because he's going to be a recurring villain going forward, but it's also nice to have foreshadowing for players who are playing this after having completed the original series. Prequels can be quite hard to do. The big story beats are already in place, and there's a whole bunch of things that are set in stone that the audience is already aware of. And you also run the risk of demystifying things, like when Star Wars fans spent years imagining how Yoda might fight with a lightsaber, and then when we were shown it, to me, it was just much less exciting than what I might have hoped. It didn't help that he just looked like a little green Sonic. I think prequels may be a little bit easier with interactive fiction, since you can still have stakes whereby the main character can die, but regardless, I think this does a good job at hinting at future developments while still telling a self-contained story that feels complete and satisfying. This is all helped by the world building being extremely strong. We've seen a bit of Orb already on the podcast, with the fighting fantasy book Talisman of Death being set in the same world, but Orb didn't feel as well realised there as it does here, where the local area is so strongly influenced by medieval Japan. Now, on the one hand, pillaging from history is entry-level world building, but it definitely gives the world a very strong unifying aesthetic, which is, in my book, a good thing. I think the best fantasy worlds often look specific more than generic. The old world Warhammer fantasy setting really benefits from the Empire being so strongly modelled on early modern Europe, for example. A lot of fantasy worlds suffer from being a melange of different influences borrowed by people who haven't read enough proper history books, and they just end up feeling vague and poorly defined and averaged out as a result. It's always much more interesting to take something from history that people are going to be unfamiliar with and really hammer that home as a core element of your environmental design. On top of that, the author has a good eye for making locations memorable and a good turn of phrase to build intrigue. Takahiri is simply a place name, no better or worse than any other made-up place name, but calling it the City of Bridges conjures up a powerful image in just a couple of words. Add to that the ritual bathing that travellers have to perform on entering, and you've got a place that feels like it has an identity much more evocative than just being another settlement with all the usual amenities. I honestly could have stood to spend more time in the various cities, getting into scrapes and finding out more about their particular character and their local politics, but I respect that the author has focused the action squarely on the flags, and it makes sense given the time pressure that you're under, and it all ties back into that all ninja, all the time philosophy that the book has. The encounter design, I would say, is solid but unremarkable for the most part. I think the fact that it is delivering on the core fantasy so well is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. There's a decent amount of variety and surprises to be found, and there's always a chance to use some ninja skill or bit of ninja equipment. And from a design perspective, this is a story that is more informed by what you start with than what you find along the way. There's a few handy items to be picked up, but the focus, quite rightly, is on your skills and on your kit. It's all part of that relentless focus, and honestly it makes a nice change. It allows you to have a somewhat different adventure if you take different skills, and all of the skills feel useful at different points. I think if there had been a scavenger hunt as well, the gamebook would have struggled to fit everything in. So starting with a philosophy of this is going to be about the skills and the equipment that you've got with you doesn't feel problematic at all. It does have a knock-on effect that exploring can feel less enticing. That's one of the big benefits of having a character need to find stuff for later. It pushes people to look for areas that they haven't found because they've got this list of things they need. If you've found a way to get the 2 flags you need, there's not much pushing you to go and try for different ones. That's a minor quibble, since the approach taken here works absolutely fine, and I quite enjoy just going through gamebooks, trying to see everything that they've got to offer. So from my perspective, it's all good fun. But if you're playing strictly honestly, which I'm usually not by the time I start really rummaging through them, there is a slight pressure to play in a relatively conservative style. I will say that I did feel moved to explore the early part of the book pretty thoroughly in the hope that I could kill Chigurh. I couldn't, but I was delighted to discover there's a path you can take whereby Chigurh gets his stupid, smug head cut off. I think the monks were always going to be a tough sell. Monks are very hard to write well in a way that doesn't seem smug and overbearing. In the real world, I'm a big monk fan. If I had my life over, I think I would have genuinely quite liked to have become a monk. But in fiction, there's rarely anything more aggravating than the enlightened, especially for characters who are, by and large, depicted as having a fairly violence-focused approach to problem solution. If the ninja skills and equipment all work well, I am less sold on the combat system. I can see the bones of something great in there, and I can see why my younger self really enjoyed it, but looked at through a mature game design lens, it has some problems. The basic premise of selecting different attacks and trying to work out which might be the best is cool, but it doesn't really play out as well as it should in practice. Firstly, there's an issue with each fight taking up a minimum of 3 sections, which is fine for important fights, but feels a little wasteful for weaker opponents. Sections are precious real estate in many game books, and every fight requiring at least 3, that soon adds up. If you're going to use that many sections, the mechanic really needs to justify itself, which it struggles to do. I think the big problem is that different moves do not have a big enough impact. For every fight, you really want one move to be bad, one move to be good, and one move to be okay, so that there's a nice range of options depending on what move you take. As it is, in general, the benefit of throws are just not high enough. A successful throw gives you a +2 to hit and a +2 to damage. Now, the average damage from a successful punch is 3.5, meaning that a successful throw is less impactful than landing a punch or indeed a kick. It means that the throw is only worth doing if it makes it much easier to land a punch or a kick, and the difficulty of throws themselves just isn't low enough to justify using it. Added to which, a successful punch or kick will always give you damage, but when you do a throw, you still need to make another successful attack following that successful throw. Even with that +2 to the attack roll, you're going to miss some of the time, which means you're not going to get the benefit of the throw on the attack, which means you've lost that potential +2 damage. Why would you go for a potential +2 that you might lose when you could try for 3.5 damage, which you will definitely get if you land it? I think the potential impact of the throw just needs to be much higher to justify taking the risk. The second issue is related in that the baddies generally have too much health for me, and it tends to kind of obviate the decision-making part of the combat. The extra damage from a kick or a throw only matters if they can materially shorten the combat. If there's a decent chance that a throw and a kick combination could end the battle early, then it would make sense to try it, since it offers the chance of avoiding damage at all. Unfortunately, the fight will usually go on for rather longer than that, and it ends up feeling like the decisions don't contribute all that much to the outcome. in the end, whatever decision you make, you're still going to be just rolling attacks for yourself and then rolling attacks for the enemy until one of you needs to lie down. For the decision making to feel impactful, you need to feel like the right call will push you a long way to victory and the wrong call will push you a long way to defeat. As it is, you can end up trying all 3 attacks with most enemies to see what happens, and that kind of makes choosing an attack feel a little pointless. Finally, I'm not a big fan of combat systems that can throw up null results frequently. It's quite common for both you and the enemy to both miss their attacks on the same round. I feel like there's rarely an excuse for null combat results in tabletop RPGs, and even fewer in a gamebook. I really think you need to have a combat system where something happens each round. It's one of the strongest features of the fighting fantasy system. Null results do happen, but they're sufficiently rare that actually they feel a little bit cool. You're like, oh, that's surprising, I haven't seen that for a while. In the case of Way of the Tiger, 1, I think attacks should do a set amount rather than a random amount, and 2, whenever your attack misses, I think you should take damage. That would keep things flowing nicely. You could still have the parry rule, whereby you get a chance to block the damage in exchange for less of a chance of hitting the next time. I doubt it would see a lot of use. I didn't feel like using it much in the system as written, so you might as well include it for the odd edge case where it turns out to be usable. But yeah, I think it just throws up too many dull attack rounds, and dull attack rounds are kind of unforgivable when you've got this much control over how a combat plays out. It's not a huge issue, the combat system works well enough. It's not an impediment to completing the book, unlike that time an author decided that turning a bunch of fights into a straight 50-50 live or die was a good idea. It feels like a missed opportunity more than an actual problem. The premise is awesome, the implementation just isn't that good. Interestingly, I didn't really notice this as an issue at all when I was a kid. I only notice it now because I'm obsessed with systems. Overall, I had a lovely time with Way of the Tiger Ninja. It's decently written, beautifully presented. The world feels extremely well realised, and I'm very, very much looking forward to getting back into the world of Orb, which is a silly name for a fantasy world, by the way, next month for the bonus episode. Meanwhile, the next regular episode of Fantastic Fights will be featuring Tower of Destruction by Keith Martin, which I'm very much looking forward to. He's someone who really tries to push the envelope when it comes to gamebook design, so hopefully this will be a real banger of an episode. In the meantime, you can get in touch with me by emailing me at hjdoomretrofun, all one word, at gmail.com, or by following me on Blue Sky. If you enjoy what I do, why not consider supporting me on Patreon, like the lovely, lovely people who make these bonus episodes possible. Thank you very much for listening. Take care, and I'll see you soon.